Hi, this is Demi. Today, I'd like to share some knowledge and thoughts about Alzheimer's disease with you. I will use 3 videos to talk about the knowledge of Alzheimer's disease. In the first video, I will discuss the general symptoms of Alzheimer's disease from the early to late stages. In the second video, I will talk about the diagnosis methods for Alzheimer's disease in hospitals and will also provide some self-assessment methods for dementia. In the third video, I will focus on treatment and the prognosis or outcome of the disease. To make the topic easier to understand, I will frequently refer to the famous novel Still Alice and the movie Still Mine. Still Alice was written by Lisa Genova, a simple yet profound story first published in 2007. Still Alice was not based on a true story. However, the author, Genova, being a neuroscience specialist at Harvard University, created the novel based on vivid real-life experiences and extensive research on Alzheimer's disease. Still Alice has no magnificent historical background, no ups and downs plot, no twists and turns love story. It just calmly and honestly shows how Alzheimer's disease slowly but surely devours a once successful and happy family. The protagonist, Alice Howland, is just over 50 years old, a renowned linguistics professor at Harvard University. Alice has a happy family. Her husband, John, is a professor in the biochemistry department at Harvard, and her 3 adult children are all sailing toward promising paths. Her eldest daughter is a lawyer, her son is an intern doctor, and her youngest daughter, though still undecided in her career, has the potential to become an excellent actress. A disease can change everything. Alice was frequently invited to give lectures and keynote speeches at academic conferences. During one of her university lectures, Alice suddenly found herself unable to recall a professional term she had used countless times before, leaving her in a cold sweat. After experiencing similar incidents multiple times, she realized that something was wrong with her memory and decided to see a doctor. She was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's disease. The disease progressed rapidly, causing Alice's memory to deteriorate at an alarming rate. She lost her way home while jogging in her own neighborhood. She used to cook effortlessly every day, but after her diagnosis, she found herself at a loss, holding a plate and spatula in hand, not knowing what to do in the kitchen. As her memory further declined, she was even unable to find the bathroom in her own home and peed in her pants. Unable to continue her research and teaching duties, Alice was forced to retire early, and losing her career left her feeling deeply lost and empty. Alice began to feel increasingly worthless and humiliated. She secretly prepared sleeping pills, hoping to end her suffering. However, her memory had deteriorated so much that she was unable to carry out her suicidal plan. Eventually, Alice couldn't even recognize her husband and children. In the later stages of her illness, one of her students invited her to attend a graduation ceremony, yet Alice neither recognized her student nor understood why she was attending the event. She merely sat on the stage, blankly imitating others' actions. When leaving the ceremony, she nearly got hit by a car. Alice's illness also brought immense distress to her family. Her eldest daughter inherited the same genetic mutation, which means she also faces a high risk of developing Alzheimer's. Alice's helplessness and emotional turmoil deeply pained her husband and children. Although they were already extremely busy with their own careers, they had to devote significant time to caring for and accompanying Alice. Later, her husband was offered a department head position at a university in New York, forcing him to make a difficult choice: should he stay with Alice or pursue his career in New York alone? Ultimately, since Alice's condition was irreversible, her husband chose to continue his career, leaving their children to support Alice through the remaining days of her life. The novel Still Alice has won many book and media awards and was adapted into a movie in 2014. Julianne Moore's performance on Alice was widely praised, winning her numerous awards, including the Academy Award for Best Actress. So, how common is Alzheimer's disease nowadays? This disease mainly occurs in the aged population, and its incidence increases with age. Based on the U.S. population, 5% of people aged 65 to 74 have Alzheimer's disease. For those aged 75 to 84, the percentage is 13.2%, and for those 85 and older, it's a staggering 33.4%. Among all the U.S. population aged 65 and older, about 1 in 9 people, 10.9%, has Alzheimer's dementia. People younger than 65 can also develop Alzheimer's dementia, although the rate is 110 of every 100,000 people, 0.11%, aged 30 to 64 years. In 2024, it is estimated that a total of 6.9 million Americans aged 65 and older are living with Alzheimer's dementia. The prevalence rates of Alzheimer's disease in China are lower compared to those in the US, but the numbers are rising as the population ages and more people become aware of this disease. Some people may ask, if we live long enough, will everyone eventually get Alzheimer's disease? The answer should be no. Although closely related to aging, Alzheimer's disease is still a disease, like stroke, respiratory diseases, diabetes, and cancers. Alzheimer's patients have specific pathological changes in their brains. These pathological changes lead to the progressive degeneration of brain cells, causing a continual decline in cognitive function, memory, and the ability to perform daily activities, which is not seen in the same way in normal aging or other forms of dementia. In many situations, simply because Alzheimer's disease is the main cause of dementia, people confuse the concepts of Alzheimer's disease and dementia. However, Alzheimer's disease is only one of the causes of dementia. Other causes include cerebrovascular disease, frontotemporal degeneration, (FTD), hippocampal sclerosis, (HS), Lewy body disease, Parkinson's disease, (PD), and mixed pathologies. In addition to dementia caused by these diseases, almost all aged people may experience some extent of dementia. Should every elderly person be nervous about their memory loss? What is the major difference between Alzheimer's dementia and regular age-related dementia? Please take a look at the following tables, illustrating the main differences between Alzheimer's dementia and regular age-related dementia. As to memory impairment, Alzheimer's dementia is a profound and progressive memory loss, but aging-related dementia is mild memory loss. On the aspect of cognitive decline, Alzheimer's dementia has significant and progressive decline in multiple cognitive domains, while aging-related dementia is generally much less severe. As to behavioral changes, Alzheimer's patients may have increased irritability, apathy, depression, and sometimes hallucinations or delusions, while aging-related dementia has no significant changes in personality or behavior. For functional impact, Alzheimer's dementia may interfere with the daily life activities of the patient, but aging-related dementia does not substantially affect the daily life. Alzheimer's dementia typically worsens over time, but aging dementia progresses very slowly. Then, how serious is Alzheimer's disease? Statistically, Alzheimer's disease is the sixth leading cause of death in the US. Sounds very scary. However, the progression of Alzheimer's disease can be very long. It may take 15 to 20 years for the disease to develop before the onset of the first symptom. Not many patients experience the disease onset so early, at 50 years old, and progress so rapidly and aggressively, only 2 to 3 years from onset to the late stage, as Alice. On average, people with Alzheimer's disease live around 4 to 8 years after diagnosis, though this can vary widely. Some patients may live longer, up to 20 years after diagnosis, depending on multiple factors such as age at diagnosis, overall health, and the quality of care received. For a patient's family, the disease can be a breeze, a hitch, or even a catastrophe, depending on the stage at which the disease developed in the patient, whether the family can afford the diagnosis and treatment, and how much family and social support the patient can receive. What are the symptoms of Alzheimer's diseases? The novel Still Alice vividly describes the entire progression of Alzheimer's disease. The following storylines or excerpts are typical manifestations of the onset, early, middle, and late stages of the disease. Alice's first sign of disease onset occurs during a lecture at Harvard, where she suddenly cannot recall the word lexicon, even though she has used this term perhaps hundreds of times. Here is the excerpt. She couldn't remember the word lexicon. She'd been a professor of linguistics at Harvard for 25 years. Words were her profession, her way of being, and she couldn't remember the word lexicon. She'd used the word lexicon in countless lectures, presentations, and publications. And now, she couldn't remember it. It was on the tip of her tongue, an island, but the bridge was out, the ferry broken, and the boatman nowhere to be found. Soon, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease following cognitive testing and an MRI scan. The following excerpt describes a typical symptom of the early stage of Alzheimer's disease: confusion, a disconnect between intentions and memory, and difficulty recalling recent events. She woke early, while it was still dark outside. She lay in bed, listening to the quiet rhythm of John's breathing next to her. She wanted to close her eyes and go back to sleep, but something compelled her to get up. She had too much on her mind, too much to do. She had no recollection of what that might be, but she couldn't ignore the gnawing sense of urgency. She needed to get up and start her day. Alice got out of bed and went to the bathroom. She brushed her teeth, washed her face, and put on her running clothes. She went downstairs to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. She drank it quickly and poured another. She opened the drawer next to the sink and took out her keys, then opened the back door to the deck. She paused, not remembering why she had her keys, not remembering where she was going. She closed the door, put the keys back in the drawer, and sat down at the kitchen table, waiting for something to happen, waiting for her mind to catch up. Alice's disease progresses very fast, and soon it enters the middle stage. Alice's daily life thereafter becomes a challenge for her. She gets lost in her own neighborhood while jogging, even though she has run the same route for years, suddenly finding herself unable to recognize where she is or how to get home. At her own home, Alice struggles to figure out how to cook, even though it was her daily routine before she had the disease. She even has difficulty finding the bathroom and has an accident. She also experiences confusion about her professional responsibilities. Once, she goes to a classroom where she is supposed to give a lecture. However, she forgets that it is her job to lecture and instead sits among the students until the end of the class. When the students look at her expectantly, she smiles back at them, unaware of her role as the professor. Here is the excerpt describing the typical symptom of exacerbated memory loss where Alice cannot find the bathroom in her own house. Alice looked around, desperately trying to find the bathroom. She knew it was somewhere close, but the familiar surroundings now seemed alien and confusing. Panic set in as she felt the urgent need to relieve herself. She opened one door, then another, each one leading to a closet, a bedroom, but not the bathroom. Her mind raced, and she felt the tears well up in her eyes. She tried to remember the layout of her own home, but the harder she tried, the more elusive it became. The pressure in her bladder was unbearable, and she started to feel dizzy from the stress and confusion. Finally, she couldn't hold it any longer. She stood in the hallway, tears streaming down her face, as she felt the warm, humiliating wetness spread down her legs. She had peed on herself. She stood there, frozen, unable to move or call for help, overwhelmed by a sense of defeat and helplessness. At the middle stage of Alzheimer's, because patients struggle the most to maintain their identity, professions, and daily routines, they are day by day losing confidence, feeling frustration, and experiencing an emotional toll. Patients may become very agitated or aggressive during this stage, which can also bring huge challenges to their relationships with family members. It is also not uncommon for patients to have suicidal thoughts or tendencies at this stage when they still have enough awareness to recognize the decline in their cognitive abilities. Here's an excerpt that encapsulates Alice's suicidal tendency. She opened her laptop and went to the document she'd written back in September, only a few months after her diagnosis. It was titled Butterfly. She read the instructions she'd written to herself carefully, trying to see if they made sense to her, if she could follow them. She wasn't completely sure what each line meant, but she knew she had written them with the intention of using them when she reached this stage, when she could no longer trust herself to know what to do. She reread them several times. She knew what to do next, knew how to follow them. She had hidden a bottle of sleeping pills in the back of her bedroom closet, behind the winter sweaters she never wore anymore. She could take all the pills, all of them, and go to sleep. She could do it now, and she wouldn't have to endure the humiliations that were yet to come. She wouldn't have to wait for the horror of what the next stage might bring. Although in the novel Alice eventually forgets how to carry out her plan, the middle to late stages of the disease are key periods when patients require significant mental support. As Alzheimer's disease progresses, the late-stage symptoms may become even more heartbreaking for the patient's family members and friends. The patients may no longer recognize their close family members, and they may become confused about past and present events. They require assistance with basic activities of daily living, such as eating, dressing, and personal hygiene. Their ability to speak and understand language is significantly impaired, and they may often respond to others with simple phrases or nonverbal cues. Emotionally, they become muted and show less awareness of their surroundings. Here is the excerpt from Still Alice, describing the late stage of Alzheimer's where Alice attends her student's graduation but understands nothing and almost gets run over by a car. Alice sat in the audience at Harvard Yard, feeling utterly disconnected from the ceremony unfolding around her. She watched as her students, dressed in their caps and gowns, walked across the stage to receive their diplomas. The speeches, the applause, and the celebratory atmosphere felt foreign and confusing to her. She clapped when others clapped, smiled when others smiled, but she couldn't grasp the significance of the event. When the ceremony ended, Alice stood up and followed the crowd, hoping to find her way back home. She wandered aimlessly, the landmarks of the campus she had once known so well now unrecognizable. Panic set in as she realized she didn't know where she was or how to get home. Lost in her thoughts, she stepped off the curb and into the street, oblivious to the oncoming traffic. A car screeched to a halt just inches away from her. The driver honked loudly, and Alice snapped out of her daze, quickly stepping back onto the sidewalk. She stood there, shaken and scared, tears streaming down her face as she struggled to regain her composure and figure out how to get home. I must say, even the excerpts from Still Alice already bring tears to my eyes, and the symptoms of the very late stage or terminal stage may be too devastating or painful to fully capture in the book. Yet, these heartbreaking realities are all too common in many families. The severe late-stage symptoms may include, first, mania and aggression. Patients in the late stages of Alzheimer's may experience significant changes in behavior, including manic episodes and aggressive behavior, which can be challenging for caregivers to manage. Second, loss of mobility. In the advanced stages, individuals may lose the ability to walk and require assistance with all forms of movement. Third, inability to eat or drink independently. Patients may struggle with swallowing and lose the ability to feed themselves. Patients at this stage often rely on nasogastric feeding tubes or intravenous injections to obtain adequate nutrition or hydration to maintain life. Fourth, total dependency. At this stage, patients are usually entirely dependent on caregivers for all aspects of daily living, including personal hygiene, dressing, and toileting. Now I am at the end of this video. I hope this talk has helped you understand Alzheimer's disease better. Please keep in mind, Alzheimer's disease is not a misfortune or retribution, it is something common in an aging society. It is a tough challenge for millions of families, however, there are some solutions, and scientists are trying hard to find more. In my next talk, I'll discuss what we should do if a family member or we ourselves are showing some signs of memory loss or dementia. See you soon.